This thing's smoking out the back right now.
Did you shut the key off?
It looks like it's getting way worse.
Thick smoke billows from the engine compartment of the massive 700 series excavator as Kevin Beets races to stop a fire before it engulfs the entire machine. This season marks Kevin's first real opportunity to step out from under the shadow of his father, Tony Beets. But a sudden equipment failure threatens to turn that dream into a costly nightmare. The mine is running around the clock to reach an ambitious 1,000-ounce gold target, and every minute of downtime costs thousands of dollars. Unfortunately, the problem isn't a simple fix. The damage inside the engine is far worse than anyone initially realized. What first appeared to be a minor issue has quickly escalated into a major crisis. The excavator, known simply as the 700, is the backbone of the entire operation. It loads the trucks that haul gold-bearing pay dirt to the sluice boxes. Without it, the mining cycle comes to a complete standstill. Chase, a former gravel pit worker who recently stepped up to operate the excavator, was the first to notice something was wrong. He'd been doing well, gaining valuable seat time, but the pressure of the job is relentless. Suddenly, he smelled something burning and saw smoke pouring out of the back of the machine. This wasn't steam or exhaust, it was the unmistakable sign of a fire. The panic was immediate. A fire in a machine this large can mean the total loss of equipment worth millions of dollars. Kevin was called to the scene, and his expression said everything. He knew there was no backup excavator waiting to take over. If the 700 was out of commission, gold production would drop to zero instantly. They were staring down a mechanical disaster that could end the season weeks before freeze-up. People often focus on how much gold miners find, but they forget how much it costs to keep the machines running. When Kevin opened the engine compartment, he was met with every mechanic's worst nightmare: active flames licking at internal components and an overwhelming smell of burning material. He had to act quickly to stop the fire from spreading to the fuel lines or hydraulic tanks. If that happened, the excavator would turn into a massive fireball right in the pit. The issue traced back to the starter motor, a critical part responsible for bringing the enormous engine to life. As Kevin looked closer, he saw something shocking: a drip of solidified steel hanging from the starter housing. The metal had actually melted. That kind of damage requires extreme heat. An intense electrical short had occurred, hot enough to liquefy steel and ignite nearby wiring and plastic. As the crew watched in silence, Kevin examined the charred remains. The starter had shorted internally, creating a molten mass that set the surrounding components on fire. At first, it seemed like a freak accident, but Kevin began to suspect this might be a recurring problem with this particular machine. This wasn't even the first time smoke had come from this area. What began as a routine day of moving dirt had turned into a fight to keep the mine alive. Kevin knew the math was simple. No dirt moved means no gold recovered. With hundreds of ounces still left to find, even a single day of downtime could be devastating. The tension was heavy, and Kevin's disappointment was obvious. One spark had the power to destroy an entire season's worth of work in seconds. Gold dreams disappeared into thick smoke. As the reality set in, Kevin realized this machine had a troubling history. Earlier in the season, another excavator, the 480, had gone down due to a similar electrical issue when a solenoid caught fire after shorting out. Kevin had recently replaced the starter on the 700, and now he wondered if something had gone wrong during installation. The solenoid acts as a heavy-duty electrical switch, handling enormous current between the battery and the starter motor. If anything isn't connected perfectly, it can generate extreme heat. Looking at the melted plastic housing, Kevin knew something had failed. He questioned whether the cables had been routed incorrectly or if the replacement part itself was defective. Either way, the consequences were severe. The frustration weighed heavily on him. Trying to prove himself as a leader is hard enough, but doing it under the expectations of Tony Beets, who doesn't tolerate excuses, makes it even harder. Kevin feels like every step forward is followed by dozens of steps back. The crew looked to him for answers, but for a moment, he had none. He stood staring at the molten metal, thinking about the 1,000-ounce goal slipping further out of reach. With no excavator available to load trucks, hauling pay dirt isn't possible. And without pay dirt moving, the dream of hitting that gold target looks less and less likely. Time is quickly running out. In the Yukon, the clock is always working against the miners. They have only 5 to 6 months each year to earn their entire income. Losing just 4 hours may not sound like much to most people, but in gold mining, those hours can mean tens of thousands of dollars gone. The crew was operating non-stop, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, to squeeze every possible ounce out of the short season. Any interruption to that schedule is a serious setback. Kevin realized he had no option but to handle the repair himself. Waiting for a professional mechanic to reach their remote site wasn't realistic, and they didn't have a spare starter readily available. Or so it seemed. Fortunately, Faith managed to track down a replacement part, giving the team a much-needed glimmer of hope. Kevin hoped it would be a straightforward repair, but this time he knew he had to be extra cautious. He focused on reinforcing the main power cable, adding additional insulation, and making sure nothing could rub, spark, or short against the frame. He openly admitted that the previous installation may not have been done correctly. A tough admission for a mine boss, but an important one. Owning mistakes is the only way to prevent them from happening again. A short circuit in a machine this large can generate terrifying levels of heat, well over 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit in seconds. That's more than enough to melt steel and destroy a starter motor. Kevin knew how lucky they were that the fire hadn't reached the main hydraulic lines, which operate under enormous pressure. If a hydraulic line fails during a fire, oil can spray out like a blowtorch and destroy the entire machine within minutes. The survival of the mine depends on these mechanical giants. Melted steel turns into a technical nightmare. For several hours, Kevin worked deep inside the cramped engine compartment, covered in grease and soot. The space was tight, dangerous, and filled with sharp edges and hot metal, but he stayed focused. The 1,000-ounce goal was still within reach, if they could get back up and running quickly. When he removed the damaged starter, the extent of the destruction became obvious. Sections of the housing had melted away, and the internal components were fused together. It was completely beyond repair. Kevin carefully installed the new starter, tightening every bolt to specification and paying close attention to the positive and negative power cables. He made sure they were routed safely, away from sharp edges that could wear through the insulation over time. This was easily one of the most stressful moments of Kevin's season. He was racing against the clock and carrying the weight of the entire crew's expectations. Brennan stood by, waiting to get back to hauling pay dirt, while trucks sat idle with engines running, burning fuel and money without producing any gold. Finally, the installation was complete. Kevin climbed into the cab and paused for a moment. This was the defining test. If the machine started, they were back in the fight. If it didn't, or worse, if it sparked again, the consequences would be severe. He turned the key. At first, there was only a click. He tried again. The engine began to turn. On the second attempt, the massive diesel roared to life, sending a cloud of black smoke into the air. To everyone on site, it was a beautiful sound. Against all odds, Kevin had repaired the excavator in just 4 hours. He handed the machine back to Brennan and told him it was time to get to work. The relief on Kevin's face was obvious, though he knew they still had ground to make up. After only 4 hours of downtime, the operation was fully back in motion. Brennan immediately began loading trucks, pushing hard to reach the extension pay before the stockpile ran out. Kevin reflected on how this entire season had been a battle from start to finish. With only a few weeks left, he stressed the importance of staying positive. The 1,000-ounce goal was still alive, and they weren't giving up. Repairs like this can easily cost $5,000 in parts and labor, not including lost production. When you factor in the gold that wasn't mined during those 4 hours, the total cost of the fire likely exceeded $20,000. That's why miners obsess over preventative maintenance, because one faulty wire can cost a fortune. Even a successful repair can never recover lost time. With the excavator back in action, the crew finished their week of sluicing and prepared for the gold weigh-in, the most exciting and nerve-wracking moment of the week. This is when miners find out if all the hard work, stress, and mechanical headaches were worth it. Kevin and his team gathered around the scale as the gold was poured out. The numbers began to climb, 100, 120, 140, until the final total landed at 159.05 ounces for the week. At current gold prices, that haul was worth nearly $400,000. It was an impressive result, especially after dealing with a fire and hours of downtime. The new total brought their season haul to 471.05 ounces. While that's a strong number, it still leaves them just under halfway to their 1,000-ounce goal. Kevin did the math. They still need another 528.95 ounces. With the season entering its final weeks, time is running short. The pressure is back on, but the mood at the mine has shifted from panic to cautious optimism. The pans coming out of the Lynx extension, the area they're currently mining, are looking promising. Kevin knows doubling their gold next week is ambitious, but not impossible if everything goes right. He reminded the crew to keep hustling. There's still plenty of gold buried in that frozen ground. So, does Kevin Beets have what it takes to finally step out of his father's shadow? Or will the harsh Yukon continue to hold him back? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to the Timefold channel and hit like.